So I finally left that position after a few years, and I started looking for another job. I actually ran into something as soon as I graduated, I turned 18, I ran into this door-to-door sales job. Um, it was another release for me, I was always looking for something,
Mhm.
something to get me out of me and not to worry about what was actually going on in my life.
Mm.
So, crushed the interview, they hire me, and I just become a workaholic now.
Yeah.
Now all I'm doing, I have about 2 months sober. I'm not going to meetings anymore. I'm not focusing on my recovery. I'm focusing on work because that's important now. You know,
Yeah.
it's so funny because I can see the I can see the same thing happening in my life, right? I get a little bit of sober time. Um, my skin color's back, my hair looks okay, I got some nice clothes on, and I'm all freshened up. Now it's work goes in front of my relationship with God.
Yeah.
Money goes in front of my relationship with God. Relationship goes in front of my relationship with God. I start putting all of these things, these material things that God I can see now will ultimately align.
Mm.
I start putting all these material things in front of my relationship with God.
Yeah.
So, God would be on the back burner. I'd drag God along with me where I was going, but I wasn't making it a core focus of my life is going to be surrounded with God. I'm bringing God in all of my details of my
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah, so then since you weren't following God's plan, even though he's sovereign, right? Like, he still has you on his plan, but you weren't letting him be the one in the driver's seat, so
Oh yeah.
what ended up happening in your life then?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of it was, fake almost,
Mm.
it wasn't real, so I stayed at this position for I became really good at it. I I started making over $1,000 a week, so I was like, "I'm staying here
Wow.
doing this," I was 18 years old, I'm fresh out of high school, I'm like, "This is what I was born to do," basically,
Yeah.
I'm having all these awakenings, like, "This is what I'm meant to be," and so about a year into it, I moved to Michigan because there was an opportunity out there to start up a new location. So I did that. I moved out there, and I started at the time dating my manager because you know me, right? I do things that are comfortable. I look at things as how can I get the most out of it?
Yeah, yeah.
So I start dating my manager so I can be the next manager.
Mm.
I mean,
Wow.
it's horrible to say, but
Yeah,
that's where my selfishness
I
and
get that.
self-centeredness comes from when it especially when God's not in the middle of it.
Yeah, and as a beautiful woman, you kinda there's a dangerous power in there if you're not surrendered to God's will.
Oh, yeah. Things will seem like they're very tied up in a bow just for you, and it is a present from the enemy, is
Mm,
what it can be.
oh
So
my
I became so I called it at the time driven to succeed, um, but I'm leaving behind my sobriety. I'm leaving behind the spiritual life that is important. Well, when I get to Michigan, I'm way far out of my comfort zone. I know nobody out there. I try to go to like a meeting out there for my recovery, and I was like, this is weird. I'm not doing this.
Mhm.
Well, I become an alcoholic. I start buying liquor every day, drinking because I get to a place of uncomfortability. I get to a place of where I feel like drinking would be the best thing to do right now.
Yeah.
So I did that. And again, this sobriety is really on and off because I don't have a firm foundation that no matter what happens, I can always come back to. I'm all over the
Mhm.
place at this
Yeah.
point in time. Some way, I don't know how this works, but I scrounge up some sobriety again because I'm caught and I'm drunk all the time. People are worried about me. So, um, I figured out, scrounge up some sobriety, and then I moved back to Ohio and open up my own location. So I get the opportunity to open up my own business. Um, 4 people move with me, and I start doing it. Well, me being an addict and an alcoholic, and owning my own company so early on, honestly was more of a horrible thing to do than a good thing to do because I wasn't still doing the right thing, you know?
Mm.
I'm still listening to this music that is sucking the life out of me. I'm still cussing all the time. I'm walking around in just this version of myself that I look back at now, and there were times I wish I was that version, but I know for sure it wasn't the version of myself that God would appreciate me being.
So we are at the part of your story, where it seems like you have all this worldly success starting to happen, but as you were
Yes.
saying, God wasn't in it. So it feels like we're leading up to some sort of climax.
Yeah, you're correct. So, you're right. I had money, I had a car, I had a business. It seemed like looking into my life, oh, she's doing amazing.
Mhm.
She has everything she wants. She's just where she, wants to be. Um, and but inside, I was really depressed still.
Mm.
I had a little bit of it over a year clean. So I was trying to do the right thing. And then this is right when COVID happened. So it shut down the company that I was running because we couldn't no longer go to customers' houses anymore. Um, all meetings shut down that I was going to. Like life really took a turn um,
Mm.
for the worst, honestly, and a
Yeah.
lot and I know it just wasn't my business that this happened to, it was a ton of other people's, and I started looking at, I think I need a shift in my life, um, career-wise, I was under the impression that if something in the world would happen, that I would still have income, I would still have a job, all of my employees would still be employed, and they weren't. So
Mm.
I ultimately felt a little bit betrayed, that, everything was shut down and I was not working either, So now I'm wondering if something else is going to happen, the same thing is going to happen again. So it really made me question where I was at. Um, and instead of dealing with things, right, instead of leaning on this relationship with God that I acted like I had, um, but really didn't, um,
Mhm.
I went back to what I know. I literally drove because I'm living over an hour away from my hometown at this time, and I literally drove back to my hometown, reached out to a family member of mine, and I was like, "Hey, I have a little time sober, but I am trying to get high." And she got it for me, gave it to me,
Wow.
and this is now where my life I start to get real life consequences. See,
Mm.
I never did. I always skid by the skin of my teeth, literally,
Yeah.
like, barely not getting consequences, but not, they were more, my own consequences, health-wise, the way I
Mhm.
looked, but it was never, like, jail time, charges, suspended
Yeah.
license, OVIs. Now these things are happening, right? First day it happens, I get an OVI. And a few months prior to this, let me kind of go back. So, when all of COVID happened, shut everything down, a few months go by and we're allowed to start working again. But you have to wear a mask. So we started working with masks, and I ran into my now husband. I knocked on his door, and he's living in the town I'm from, which I had no idea that we're from the same town. So I knock on his door, and I'm trying to sell him AT&T because that's what I was doing at the time. I'm trying to get him set up with it. Well, we exchange numbers and we start kind of talking back and forth. So a few months go by. I decide to leave my position that I'm at because I just felt it was best. I didn't think I could grow there. My ex worked there. It was just an all around, I felt like, would be more of a toxic thing than a good thing for anybody. So I decided to leave that. And this is what I've done for the last 4 years. So I got very depressed because I was lonely, and
Mhm.
on top of it, I'm now making really major changes in my life, and I stopped staying connected with the people that were willing to help me.
Mm.
There were a lot of great women that I've met that are like, "Call me if you need anything, like, if something gets hard, let's do I'm here to work with you," and I just stopped reaching out to all of those people, and I'm like,
Mm.
"I got it. I'm gonna do it my own way.
Yeah, going back
So
to what you said that you've done since childhood.
exactly, I got it. No
Yeah.
worries, I got it.
Mhm.
And so I tried to do it my own way again, and I always get myself in trouble. Nobody even has to get me in trouble. I do it very well myself.
Yeah.
And now this is where consequences start to take place. Um I was over at this family member's house and I do because it's fentanyl now, it's not heroin anymore. I do some fentanyl. I get in my car and I'm gonna go to the gas station or something, and my keys in the ignition, and the neighbors see my car on, but I haven't gotten out in a while. It's been like 30, 40 minutes. So they come over to my car and they can see on my Apple Watch that my heartbeat is at 0. So they call the ambulance, and I had overdosed in my car.
Wow.
And they come and get me, they bring me back. I come back and I'm not too sure what just happened. I really forgot. I had no idea what just happened. And um the police are handcuffing me and they're going to take me to jail. And I was so
Wow.
confused. And because my key was in the ignition, they were originally trying to charge me with a DUI, driving under the influence. And
Mm.
I was like, well, I wasn't driving, it was parked. But I guess technically in the state of Ohio, they needed to charge me with something that day.
Yeah.
So they charged me with the physical control, which is basically like an OVI, it's no better. But those were like my first real consequences where I'm sitting in a jail
Wow.
cell. And I call my boyfriend at the time, Justin, which is now my husband,
Okay.
and he's sober. And I'm like, this isn't going well. My own way isn't going too well. Can you
Yeah.
come pick me up from jail? And these were like now these consequences were really setting in with me, because that's something I felt so prideful of,
Yeah.
never had these consequences. I always got by and no jail time or never arrested. Like I that was prideful for me.
Yeah, I get that.
And so then these things start happening.
And
So that
that
was
makes it
a
become
big
real, like that
oh yeah.
and it becomes a part of like, you see it now as your identity when you begin to like, if you get legal charges or something like this. I had a moment like that where I got arrested, I got it expunged when I was 18, but for shoplifting, and I almost lost my scholarship, and
Oh yeah.
it was so stupid, but it was one of those moments that made me realize, like, that's not who I wanna be.
Yeah. And I have always seems to be this person too. It's like all or nothing with me. So it was almost like I wanted to change. I had this desire, I really did, to be a different person.
Mm.
And in scripture, how what I'm trying to say makes sense. It's Romans 6, 7, and 8, where it explains why we sin.
Mm.
I want to do the right thing, but I can't. Like,
Yeah.
I have this desire to be a good person, do the right thing. Everybody wants me to as well. Everybody wants me to be this great person and do the right thing because they know my heart, you
Yeah.
know? When I'm stuck in this cycle, and that's why it was so important for me to understand that what I go through is a disease. Once I take one of these drinks, one of these pills, one smoke something, one of whatever,
Yeah.
it then sets off this trigger in my brain. I can't do it normally. I cannot do it socially. Even if my brain tells me I can, I can't, because time after time, these are the things that happen. It's jails, institution, and death for me. And thank you, Lord, I haven't made I'm not in a grave, you know, but I'm also not going to do it until that. There's been many times I've been faced with death, like this close, like really probably should have. And God felt it fit for me not to go yet. So
Wow. I
there's
think there's a
obviously a
Bible
bigger
verse.
plan.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think there's a Bible verse too about how he punishes the one he loves. Like there's consequences so that then
Mhm.
change because if you keep getting away with this stuff, I actually what was I watching the other day? I was watching a movie and this businessman like kept sinning, like he just lived like a very worldly businessman kind of life and his mom
Mhm.
was a believer who was on her deathbed and he was sitting there and she kinda had, like, dementia, so she didn't really know who she was talking to half the time, and he looked at her and he's like, "You believe in this God, but, like, here I am, like, I do whatever I want and nothing bad ever happens," and she looks at him and, like, actually remembers for a second, and, she goes, "Well, sometimes the devil lets us be comfortable in our life of sin so that we don't ever think we need to cry out to God for help."